Which test is easier, the SAT or the ACT? This is a great question. It's a huge question. We get this question a lot. And it's funny because no test is easier than the other. What we recommend students do is figure out which test is best for them. The SAT and ACT, these are both standardized tests that, a lot of colleges require of students to take in order to make an admissions decision. Some colleges are test optional, some colleges are test blind, some colleges don't require these tests, some do. And we talked about this last week. If you have colleges, let's say you're a sophomore, but there are schools that you know for sure you're going to apply to when you are a senior in high school, stay up to date with what the school's news are, because there are colleges that right now they are test optional, but they're test optional till this year. They're going to start requiring these tests again. There are colleges who are going to stay test optional. There are colleges that are going to get rid of standardized tests. But that's why it's important to MIT's, and I talked about this last week during last week's live stream, MIT is deciding to start requiring these tests again. And, over the past 2 years, a lot of colleges were test optional. Obviously, because of COVID, it was hard to require every student to submit these exams because not every student had the opportunity to take a test. There was limited seating. Test centers were being closed because of the pandemic. But now that hopefully things are a little bit better, they're back to semi-normal because they're not back to normal. There's going to be more changes. There's going to be more colleges that are no longer test optional and that will require these tests. All right, so now that little tangent's out of the way, which one's easier, the SAT or ACT? It depends. Each test has some similarities and some differences that set them apart. And some students might perform better on the SAT and some students might do better on the ACT. While the overall structure of these tests is somewhat similar, they have a reading section, they have a math section, there's also some differences. For example, the ACT has a science section, the SAT does not. If you're a student who sees themselves thriving or doing better in a science section, who enjoys, science, and also the science section is not, very technical science terms. It's more critical thinking, things like that. So that's why it's important to take these two exams, do practice tests, take a practice test for each exam and kind of feel it out. Maybe you'll realize that, you're not a science person, but you take the science section of the ACT and you'll realize that the way that the questions are structured, it's not really technical, content on science. Is more about the way you think, right? So maybe you'll realize that the ACT is for you, or maybe you'll realize that the ACT is not for you. You are going to be better off by focusing on the SAT. So that's why it's important to do trial and error, figure out which test is best for you, and focus on one exam and dedicate your energy, dedicate your time and effort to preparing to just one test. Some students make the big mistake of practicing and studying for both, and maybe that will help them. They will get high scores in both, but I personally believe it's easier to choose one, figure out which test is best, which one is a little easier or will be a best fit for the student, and dedicate their time to just practicing for that one exam. Great question, Monica, and I hope that you figure out you do mock tests, because you can find mock exams for the SAT and ACT, free, mock tests, and take it at home and figure out which one feels better, which one you can see yourself doing what better at. And of course, you can check your answers and say, I did better on the SAT mock test practice exam than the SAT. And then just focusing and trying to do better in that one exam. All right. So great question. Thank you so much, Monica. And if you want to learn more tips on how to go to college with scholarships, remember we have a free training linked in our bio, 6 Secrets to Go to College with Scholarships, link in our bio in Instagram and TikTok. If you're watching this in Instagram and TikTok, visit the link in our bio. If you're watching this on YouTube, the link is in this video's description.